Now, when you go over to Luke, Luke does it differently, but basically the same purpose. Luke is writing, of course, not just to Jews. Luke is writing as much to the Gentiles as to the Jews, and so he has to, let's see, where are we? Starts in verse 23. Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being the son of Joseph. Now what Luke does is start with Jesus and go back. Matthew started with Adam and came forward. Because with Matthew writing to Jews, it's more important to get those big names out first. Abram. Now let's start with Abram. Everybody wants to know, okay, yes, Abram and Isaac, and they can follow all the way through. Here, Luke, who is a Gentile, he's not Jewish, he's that physician that went with Paul, he starts with Joseph and works back to Heli and all the way back, and he eventually gets back to Adam in chapter 38. Now, why does he go back to Adam, whereas Matthew only starts with Abram? Matthew starts with Abram because that's the covenant for the Jews, the Abraham. But what Luke wants to do is trace the line all the way back through Abram, through David, for the same basic purpose, to show that Jesus is the legitimate king, that he is in the covenant with Abram, but he wants to go beyond that because Luke is writing to the world, to Gentiles as well as Jews. So what he does is takes him all the way back to Adam, and then he finishes the chapter, which was from God. So that everybody in the world who traces their own ancestry to creation are now getting a description that Jesus is not only the king, this is true in Luke, but it's the big point in Matthew. He's not only the king, but he's the perfect man, because we trace him back to Adam, who was of God. And so if you want to see what God had intended for the human race when he created Adam, it's Jesus. So he goes a step further than Matthew because he's broadening it out to the whole human race. So when you work with a genealogy, you have to fit it within the theme of the book. What is it that they are doing in this book? What is their main purpose? Who's their audience, if you can? And then you try to see what they've put in that genealogy and the way they've arranged it to see how it harmonizes with the message. And they just, basically, Matthew and Luke have different audiences, but they are trying to do the same thing with the genealogy, that this Jesus is the perfect man, the heir to the throne of David, the ideal son of Abraham, all these things together. And so there's a spiritual purpose to the genealogy rather than just physical. So when you're working with genealogies, every one of them has to be looked at differently to ask, what are they doing in this passage to use a genealogy? They are all bridges, no question about that. A bridge between here's Jesus, here's David, here's Abram, here's Adam. So we've got this bridge. Fine, but why do we need that bridge? Because if somebody's going to be the heir to the throne of David, he has to be legitimately in the line. In the kings of Old Testament, God said to the kings of the north in Israel through Hosea, "You have set up kings, but not by me." In other words, there were a lot of usurpers, that they killed the king and took over the throne. No prophetic sanction for that. They were not in the line. Whereas in the southern kingdom of Judah, every king who's on the throne was a descendant of David, because the Davidic covenant said he had to be. Now in the New Testament, Jesus comes along. He's born into this family. There were probably a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds of men, in the tribe of Judah in the days of Jesus. One of them would be a king in the line, not all the family, just like in the days of Solomon or any of the kings of Israel. There were other descendants of Judah that might have said, "I'm heir to the throne," but the closest to the direct line is what you're trying to get.